Los Angeles, the global center of the entertainment business, where every aspiring actor or entertainer goes to make their dreams come true. And at its epicenter is Hollywood. By the mid-1990s, pop star Madonna was a global phenomenon. She'd been at the top of the entertainment tree for over a decade, one of the most enduring and popular pop acts on the planet.
You couldn't get any bigger as a celebrity at the time. She was at the peak of her career from a pop music perspective. There was no bigger female artist in the world at that time than Madonna.
Her success had given her international fame, unimaginable riches, and an opulent lifestyle to complement her status as rock royalty.
Madonna is absolutely at the top of everything. She is extremely wealthy. She is extremely successful with everything that she does. Her tours were making crazy amounts of money.
Always on tour, always in the press, the queen of pop at that time.
Her music, her fashion, and her entire personality had broken new boundaries in popular culture.
She was also very progressive, very forward-thinking, breaking barriers, not just, with being sexually provocative and really pushing those boundaries, but also with recognizing trends and making them more mainstream. Her stuff was pretty simple, but very, very catchy, very appealing across the board to everyone. She was, girls wanted to be her, guys wanted to be with her, and gay guys definitely, the whole gay community embraced her as one of their own.
Madonna was the hugest pop star, and what comes with the territory, if you are that level of an icon, is you're going to have a lot of fans, and within that fan base, maybe even outside the fan base, there will be unstable people that become focused upon you.
For months, and unknown to her, Madonna was receiving the undivided attention of a man who regarded her as his wife.
Madonna was one of those people who attracted a lot of fans, a lot of good people, but also some people who were not that good.
Celebrities spend so much of their early careers trying to become known. And the downside that we all appreciate now is that by exposing themselves, it has exposed them also to the negative invasion of their space.
Madonna's self-appointed husband and herself had never met, but he was about to enter her world with life-threatening consequences. Madonna Louise Ciccone was born and raised in Bay City, Michigan, on the shores of the Great Lakes.
Huge Catholic family, lost her mom at a young age, dad's trying to raise them.
Because she lost her mum and she felt that the person who loved her the most in the world was gone, she felt she needed to make the whole world fall in love with her to make up for that, and she's credited that with being a driving force for her legendary ambition.
She'd been working very, very hard at her craft for a very long time before somebody finally paid some attention to her, like getting her music out there. The songs that we hear, those did not just happen then. She'd been working on them for a while, working on the look, working on the whole thing.
She moved to New York City in 1978 to pursue a career in modern dance.
She says to this day it was the bravest thing she ever did, turning up with just $35, with knowing no one really. She had no friends, she didn't have family supporting her financially. She just did it all by herself.
Surviving on popcorn for some of the evenings where she couldn't quite get it together to get a meal.
After performing as a drummer, guitarist, and vocalist in the music groups Breakfast Club and Emmy, Madonna signed with Sire Records in 1982 and released her eponymous debut album the next year.
It did really well. She sold 10 million copies, amazing for any debut artist. Madonna has broken more records than any other female entertainer. True Blue was one of the biggest selling albums of the 80s. It sold over 25 million copies. She had achieved so much in the spheres of touring, music sales, everything. No one thought that she was going to go from a sex book that was all about erotic fantasies to a few years later starring as Eva Peron in Evita and singing Andrew Lloyd Webber ballads. You can just never predict where she's going to go next because she never wants to repeat herself. She always wants to keep the audience on their toes, and that's why she's always still relevant and always the queen of pop.
By 1995, Madonna was combining the dual roles of movie star and pop star and had relocated to Los Angeles.
She felt like she'd already conquered the world of music, and this was after only a few years since the release of her debut album. But she then thought, right, I've ticked that off, I want to conquer Hollywood. She wanted to be an actress. The film career didn't go as well for Madonna as music did. She got off to a good start. She released Desperately Seeking Susan, which was a big hit and became very culturally iconic. But essentially she was playing herself in Desperately Seeking Susan.
Anything she touched was making money. Even her movies, which were not necessarily critically acclaimed, were not huge box office bombs. And she is absolutely at the top of that world. Anything associated with her is at the top of the world. I believe her PR at the time was almost as famous as Madonna for being the person that everything gets filtered through, or the person that's her spokesperson at the time. So any kind of Madonna attachment was, first of all, it just didn't even feel real. Like nobody ever saw her, and it was just like really one of those like holy grail type situations to have any association with Madonna at all.
To protect herself, the star had taken a house in the Hollywood Hills, just off Mulholland Drive, and within the shadow of the iconic Hollywood sign. A virtual fortress to keep her safe and prying eyes out.
Palatial. It's very much like a palace, overlooking Hollywood Lake, Hollywood Reservoir, with forested land and jogging trails surrounding it. It's a beautiful piece of property.
A huge estate, many levels, and it looks like a castle.
But one man was intent on getting inside. His name was Robert Dewey Hoskins, and he was about to stalk her incessantly, invade her privacy, and come close to committing the ultimate crime.
He massively crossed over the line to the point where things got terrifying.
Madonna was living the dual life of a pop icon and movie star as her fame grew even greater.
Everyone wanted to look like Madonna. All the young girls in the world were dressing like Madonna. They had their fishnets, they had their bleached hair, they had their crucifixes. That Desperately Seeking Susan look was suddenly huge.
She was just so exciting and so beyond aspirational, because you could just only hope to be like certain parts of her. And that was like the greatest compliment people could give you. It's just like, oh, that's like something Madonna would wear, or that's something, or that's like a Madonna hairstyle, or you have like a beauty mark like Madonna, or anything like that. And of course at the time, like she was so fit.
But with stardom comes fan worship. Madonna was living in the castellated and secure Los Angeles mansion, Castillo del Lago, a 9-bedroom chateau in the Hollywood Hills designed by John Delario, the famed Hollywood architect of the early 20th century.
Castillo del Lago means, in Spanish, castle by the lake, and it overlooks Lake Hollywood. Lake Hollywood is a reservoir. for the city of Los Angeles, near the Hollywood sign. So it's up off of Mulholland Highway. It has huge gates and a long winding driveway that's about a quarter mile to the main house. When you get to the main house, there's many ways to access it. After you get into the front door, you can take an elevator up to the main level. You can walk the stairs to that level, or you can walk the side stairs over by the carport to the pool area. So it's a huge estate, many levels, and it looks like a castle.
When the Hollywood land sign looked like this, the developers hired Delario to design properties on what was 500 acres of real estate. What the people who bought these properties wanted was luxury, exclusivity, but most of all, inaccessibility. One of the occupants of Castillo del Lago in the late 1930s was the famed gangster Bugsy Siegel. But no amount of security could stop his enemies from eventually taking him out, as he visited a friend's home in Beverly Hills. But while Madonna had concerns for her privacy, they centered around overzealous fans, and she believed technology and good personal security guards could keep most people at bay.
Been a bodyguard for quite a while. I was in the military, and I was a bodyguard for Michael Jackson. And I happened to meet Freddie DeMann, and Freddie hired me to work for Madonna. And that was early 90s, about 1993. Eventually, I ended up moving into her estate, Castillo del Lago, in 1994. And I was sort of like the person who does security, but also I was in charge of the household. I made sure that everything ran smoothly. We had cameras monitoring what was happening 24 hours a day. People had access because it was right next to a city park where there's a walking trail and next to Lake Hollywood. So everybody knew who lived there, and everybody who wanted to come and see her rang the doorbell or left a note or left a message or tried to get in. So I ended up taking about, in the 2 years that I was there, probably about 15 to 20 people into custody and holding them for the police that had actually come over the fence uninvited. It had some challenges, but the best part about it was that there was only one way you could get in, unless you repelled and you were special forces or something like that. The only way to get in is through the front. I mean, through the back, it was straight, steep mountains and huge walls. So that was one of the good parts about it, that you really couldn't get in. You could only get in one way.
But high walls couldn't deter one man. His name was Robert Dewey Hoskins.
Had a horrific childhood, was beaten routinely by his father. Father used a bullwhip on him for disciplinary reasons. He had a farm accident at one point in time while he was growing up that caused him to lose a finger, which created an extended hospitalization period, at which time he got addicted to pain-killing medication. So it was just a horrific childhood that contributed to the man that he became. He was a pariah to his family. He had a wife and 5 children that he beat.
To the point where she changed her name and moved from Washington State to Florida. He had used so many drugs throughout his life that he wasn't normal, he wasn't right.
Pretty much anything he could get his hands on, but his drugs of choice were methamphetamine and heroin. In addition to that problem, he also had a psychotic mental illness, likely schizoaffective disorder or maybe paranoid schizophrenia.
He had been arrested for many dangerous crimes, including battery on a police officer, attempted murder, and domestic violence.
In the early 1990s, Hoskins was homeless and moving from place to place along the west coast of the United States.
Hoskins drifts from the Pacific Northwest into Southern California, and he's got these delusions. He's having these hallucinations. He's abusing drugs. He's basically living on the street, and he's a mess.
Part of Hoskins' delusion was that he had met Madonna somewhere in the Midwest, when she was in another form. He believed she was in a male form at the time. Hoskins had this delusion that Madonna was a spirit that could change forms and inhabit any person's body.
Then, Robert Hoskins' fixation became crystallized and focused on Madonna, but through someone else.
He's on a tour bus in Denver, Colorado, as he's traveling around the country, and he ends up sitting next to a man. He believes that the entity of Madonna is in this man, and that he married this entity in a spiritual way on this tour bus. The man goes his separate way, he goes his separate way, but then he figures he needs to be reunited with this Madonna entity. His delusion was that he was the fifth amoeba of God, and that Madonna was an entity that moved from body to body, ultimately at one point inhabiting Madonna, the actress, pop star, and that it was his destiny to be together with her, that was a spiritual destiny.
And the persona that Madonna was portraying in various media was not in tune with what Hoskins envisioned his wife being.
Because she had invited people into her life so much and given away so much personally, it was almost like it was feeding that kind of unhealthy obsession.
Being delusional is in fact a form of mental illness. So the situation is that they feel they have a relationship with this individual is a causative factor and needs to be addressed.
He felt as if it was in the stars, so to speak, for him and her to unite. And as preposterous on the face of it that's his reality. And that's what you have to deal with.
In search of the embodiment of Madonna, Hoskins decides to travel across the United States.
Hoskins hitchhikes his way to New York looking for Madonna, pop star actress, at the MTV offices. They say she's not here, she's in LA. He hitchhikes his way back across the United States, and now he finds himself in Hollywood.
He was very dysfunctional, and I tell you, it's hard to figure out the next steps of these types of pursuers, and it's hard to forecast.
In LA, Hoskins is living and sleeping rough.
Being a drifter, being accustomed to living on the street, there were numerous places for him to hide and live in that area without detection. There's various resources available to the homeless population here in the Los Angeles area. We happen to be a magnet for the homeless population, so he took full advantage of the resources that were available to him. He was here specifically to see Madonna, to affirm their relationship.
In Hollywood, he starts asking questions. Hey, where's Madonna? People point him in the direction of where her house is, and he ends up at her house.
Hoskins began to communicate with Madonna.
Letters, frequented her estate on multiple occasions.
These were like written on the back of pieces of paper he had found, or mailers that he had found, on the sidewalk.
In one letter, he claimed Madonna had defiled herself. He expressed his outrage as her husband.
He left a note, and that's when he left the defiled note. It was on a religious paper, but he wrote, I'm yours, you're mine, Robert Dewey Hoskins, I love you. And he put her full name there, Madonna Louise Ciccone.
If Madonna's management had known about Hoskins and his intentions, they might have studied the correspondence in greater detail or reported the matter to police. They were about to find out just how serious his intentions were.
Madonna's completely unaware of this stalking behavior. She's completely unaware of Robert Hoskins. There was no communication between the two of them prior to him showing up at her residence.
The entourage that surrounds and protects Madonna had no way of knowing all the great lengths he had gone to find her and pursue her.
You can keep going up in the hills in Los Angeles, but there's really no place to hide. There really isn't. If the coyotes can find you, then so can everyone else.
Hoskins shows up at her front gate trying to get inside the location. Steve Stephens was living on site, with surveillance cameras all around the property. He was able to see Hoskins as he attempted to breach the property fence and confronted him and told him to go away.
He actually rang the bell and then he threw his bags over the fence and he climbed the fence. When I left the property, I armed myself to encounter him. I confronted him and he ran. And he headed back over the fence and grabbed his bags and took off.
Hoskins, in his deluded state, had a parting warning for Stephens.
He told me I was on his property when I had the confrontation with him and to get off and that he was going to have me fired. He believed in his own mind that he lived there. I did call the police. I showed them the video. Simple trespass. They patrolled the area looking for somebody and they couldn't find him. And that was my first encounter with Hoskins.
What you look at are behaviors, and his behaviors were fairly constant. He'd go to the home, find out if she was there. I think a turning point for her bodyguard was when he actually breached the security and entered the property. That was different, and that's what we look for, which is we will have individuals that for years will do the same behavior. For example, one individual that every morning will drop off a newspaper to their love object every morning and has been doing that for years. And to us, that's normal. It's when she stops doing that that we worry, because now something has changed. So when he did something that was quite different from what he had previously done, that was a red flag.
But as Basil Stephens would discover, Robert Hoskins was not easily deterred. And as his obsession continued, his next moves were to be life-threatening.
I think that if he felt rejected by her, I think he would kill her.
In April 1995, the security around Madonna's home was breached when Robert Hoskins scaled the wall of Castillo del Lago in the Hollywood Hills to try to see the superstar.
Madonna has always been very clear with the boundaries between her working life, in which she gives her all, and her personal life, which she's always been very private about. His obsession had gone to such extremes that he massively crossed that line, and the consequences of it ended up being really terrifying.
On that occasion, the man was stopped by Madonna's personal bodyguard, but Hoskins was determined and was soon back at Castillo del Lago.
The second time, I was running some errands and Madonna's manager, a lady named Carice Henry, who's no longer with us, was in the house. Hoskins rang the bell and he said, "I'm here to see Madonna. This is Robert Dewey Hoskins, she's my wife." As he was walking away from the property, after he had left the note and had the conversation with Carice, he ran right past Madonna and her trainer, and he didn't recognize her. I mean, they were within 2 feet of each other. Every day with her trainer, when she was in Los Angeles, she would go running around the lake. And, in a very nondescript, no makeup, of course, sunglasses and sweatsuit, baggy sweatsuit and baseball cap, and people wouldn't even recognize her. It wasn't unusual for people to be seen walking on that road, so she didn't think anything of it. Immediately I got up there, I didn't see him, I scanned the neighborhood, and I then went up to the house and I told her that the same person who had jumped the fence about 2 weeks earlier, I looked at the video, was the same person who was there today. I contacted Los Angeles Police Department Threat Management Unit again and followed up with them on this and handed them the note where he gave his name as Robert Dewey Hoskins.
Madonna is a huge celebrity, no doubt. But that doesn't mean she can't be safe. That doesn't mean she doesn't have a right to survive. That doesn't mean she doesn't have a right to a certain amount of privacy. I realize it's difficult, but they have ways of getting it. But when they're continually hounded, there's no reason for that at all.
For Steve Stephens, Hoskins now represented a very real danger. But Madonna's upcoming departure from the mansion gave him some comfort.
I was a bit concerned. I knew she was leaving in about three or four days, so I was just very cautious and very vigilant, and I stayed close to the house to make sure that I was there. I tried not to leave at all for anything while her remaining few days there.
If someone's that determined and you're that public and your moves are advertised by your media campaign or just news outlets, it's scary. And it does take a toll, because oftentimes the victims will share that, it's in their head constantly. It's in their head. They might be focused on other things, but at the end of the day, when their defenses relax, they go back to, what's this guy doing?
A few weeks later, Hoskins came back to Castillo del Lago. This time, events took a violent turn.
Hoskins, despite being homeless, mentally ill, very sick, under the influence of drugs, is still resourceful and determined enough to find his way to Madonna's house, where ultimately he's going to show up at the gate, hop over the fence, and be confronted by Steve Stephens.
On the evening of May 29th, Hoskins scaled Madonna's fence, bending back one of the steel poles holding the fencing. Ignoring a no trespassing sign, he crept up to the front door and tried to look inside. Steve Stephens found him a short time later by the swimming pool.
I was at home monitoring video cameras, and I saw Hoskins again throwing his duffel bags over the fence. First thing I did was I called 911. I explained that I was at Castillo del Lago. I gave him the address. I explained it was Madonna's home. I explained we had a trespasser who was on the property. It's a low incident call. It's not a high incident call for the Los Angeles Police Department, a trespasser. I also called the local security patrol. We had a patrol that patrolled the area that we paid for, that monitored alarms, and there's an armed guard. I knew this armed guard very well. We spoke at just about every day. He came by. Sometimes I gave him coffee. I called the security patrol and I said, send somebody, because I'm sure I'm gonna need backup before the police arrive, because I knew the police weren't gonna be there in a hurry. At that point, I watched him go up the driveway, throw his duffel bags over a 9-foot fence, scale the fence, and head up to the pool area above me.
He was fit, probably in his mid-30s. At the peak of physical fitness, living on the street, kind of a hard lifestyle, it forces you to be self-reliant. He was quite agile, and he made it over that fence quite effortlessly.
Even though the house was secure and I had the alarms on, this concerned me because there were glass windows and doors all around the kitchen area, and that's adjacent to her bedroom, so he could get in. A lot of expensive art, a lot of expensive things inside that house, so we definitely didn't want him inside the house. Within a minute, the security patrol arrived, and I explained to him that I needed some assistance. I wanted to go confront this guy. We both went up the stairs to the pool area, and we found Hoskins in the pool, naked, swimming.
And it sounds like Bob's plan was to swim, go inside, take a shower in the master bedroom, get himself all prettied up, go downstairs, cook her dinner, have a candlelight dinner with her, and then kill her.
We asked him to get out, and he started cursing at us, telling us it was his property. So the security guy got nervous. He told me he was going to wait downstairs. This is an armed security guy that was supposed to help me out. And I stayed there because I didn't want him getting into the house. And I tried to talk to him to calm him down. He proceeded to get dressed. I told him to move very slowly because I was armed and I had a holstered weapon, but I told him to move very slowly.
But Hoskins, believing he was on his own property, wasn't going to take orders from anyone.
If you're not scared of anything and you don't have any concept of what's going on and you're living in this made-up world in your twisted mind, this is a terrifying person to be facing, because you can't reason with him. You can't explain to him why what he's doing is wrong or why what he believes is not true, because he has no reason at this time.
He cursed, he was getting red, agitated, and as he got dressed, he approached me and in a violent manner. So I pushed him back a couple of times and we struggled. He was going for my neck. At that point, I could feel his hand going for my holstered weapon. and he had his left hand was going for my holstered weapon, and he was trying to take it out of the holster. Thank God I had a level 2 holster, which you can't pull it out unless you press a button and release it. He didn't know that. He was just trying to grab for the firearm. We struggled. I pulled it out, pushed him away. He came at me and I shot him twice. Once in the arm, and once in the stomach.
Staff at the house immediately called police and an ambulance.
We had about a helicopter, 6 LAPD officers up there, fire department, whatnot. Kind of helped me out a bit, because one of the interesting things is that when he was being treated by the paramedics with the fire department, a police sergeant, a female from Hollywood division, asked him, said, "What happened here, sir?" And he said, "Well, I tried to kill that guy, but he shot me first." And she looked at the firefighters, she goes, "You guys hear that?" I said, "Yep." I said, "Okay, great." So, you know, he had no defense at that point. It wasn't like I had shot an unarmed man for no reason. And I was really glad he said that. I was hoping that he didn't die. No matter what, I don't want to shoot anyone. I still don't want to shoot anyone. And I've never shot anybody else since that happened. But it was sort of a natural reaction, life-saving reaction. You know, it's either him or me at that point. And if he got a hold of my gun, I'd be dead.
As it turns out, Hoskins survived his wounds. You know, it's kind of the nature of police work. Bad guys they refuse to die.
Hoskins was arrested for stalking and making terrorist threats against Madonna and members of her staff.
When I interviewed him later, he believed that Madonna, the entity, was inside the bodyguard, and it was Madonna that shot him, while in male form as her bodyguard.
But deluded or otherwise, Madonna's celebrity stalker was far from finished. Hoskins was about to face the object of his obsession in court, something Madonna believed would keep the threat alive.
She felt that by being in court, she was giving Hoskins exactly what he wanted, and that was to be in close proximity to her and have her talking about him.
Eight months after the shooting, Hoskins appeared in court. Madonna was also ordered by the district attorney Rhonda Saunders to appear.
Although she was terrified by what Hoskins was doing, she was at a position in her career and in her life where she didn't want to be put in a position where she had to go to court and testify and state that she was in sustained fear as a result of what Hoskins was doing. So she avoided service of the subpoenas to go to court, and it was quite challenging to track her down. Ultimately, she was served, and Rhonda Saunders put a body attachment on her to assure that she would be in court and testify. And she was very reluctant to be there, not because she was just inherently uncooperative, but because she truly feared this man.
The victim of the stalking has to be in fear of their life. That they have to come to court and they have to say it. The jury has to believe them to get a stalking conviction.
This was a victory for him. He got to be in the same room as Madonna, and she absolutely hated having to do that, but it was necessary to get him put away, which she needed because she was scared.
Ultimately, he's convicted on all counts, and he's sentenced to 10 years in state prison. And he did every single day of that 10-year sentence.
A decade later, despite his ongoing mental challenges, Hoskins was released from custody.
He had served his sentence, so he couldn't be detained any longer. So he leaves. Now, you know, we live sort of in a imperfect system. So the idea was, when he gets out, let us know.
Prior to being released from prison, he was evaluated by the prison psychologist, who determined that he was still a danger to the community. He was a mentally disordered offender. And so for that reason, he was placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold and was transferred to Patton State Hospital, which is a secured mental facility. He stayed 7 years in Patton State Hospital. Now, there are laws in place in California that require hospitals like Patton to notify the victim and to notify law enforcement prior to discharge of an inmate that's been held there in relation to criminal charges. That didn't happen.
But old habits die hard. Within a matter of months, Hoskins was in trouble with law enforcement again, this time on a vandalism charge.
And at the time that he was arrested, he was very violent with police. He ended up kicking the windows out of the police car vehicles, which added another count of vandalism to his charge. He did several weeks in a county jail facility, and prior to his discharge, my unit was able to coordinate with the Department of Mental Health and have a clinician evaluate Hoskins, and he was placed on another involuntary psychiatric hold. Pursuant to that hold that he was placed on, the state of California sought a conservatorship on Hoskins, which means the state of California is now his legal guardian, and they can decide what's in his best interest. So based on that, he was assigned to Metropolitan State Hospital, another secured facility for long-term treatment and evaluation.
In 2012, Hoskins escaped.
Madonna was playing the Super Bowl that year, and he wanted to watch her on television, and they've refused to let him watch her on television, so he escaped from the facility.
And his plan was, since I can't get to her here, I'm going to go to Indianapolis and confront her at the Super Bowl. And his plan was to jump a freight train, go to Indianapolis, and somehow confront Madonna prior to her performance at the Super Bowl.
It was a very dangerous moment for a lot of people, including Madonna.
You can imagine her anxiety when he gets out, right? When he escapes.
I got a call that Hoskins had escaped and, to be on the lookout for him.
Hoskins was hiding in Long Beach, about 8 miles from the prison he'd escaped from.
Fortunately for us, he never got out of the city of Long Beach, and he was rearrested a week later.
I've interviewed individuals that have told me in jail, this is what I should have done, and I would have gotten caught. Or maybe next time I'll do it this way. And so rehearsing how they might do it better. And that was, I think, his frame of mind. We understand that throughout his therapy, at times never talked about it.
He's a sick man, a very sick man. And I think that we'd all be better off if he was committed for life.
But with the incarceration of Hoskins, Madonna's stalker days were far from over.
She didn't just have one stalker, she had multiple stalkers.
Rob Linhart, he was a firefighter. He also similarly spent time outside Madonna's residences, and also similarly, he thought that he had a very strong connection with Madonna. He would hold up signs saying, "I need you," begging her to give him an answer to be with him. Again, not surprisingly, given Madonna's history with her previous stalker, she again was freaked out and she wanted this to be taken care of. Again, he was arrested, he was convicted, but oddly in this case, when he was arrested and convicted, he was given 3 years probation. He ended up successfully suing the police for police brutality, and he actually got quite a substantial payout. So weirdly, he ended up doing kind of all right out of his crime, but luckily things never got to the extent that they did with Madonna's previous stalker in this instance. But unsurprisingly, Madonna is very wary about this kind of thing now because she has seen how terrifying it can be when it goes too far.
In 2010, Polish national Grzegorz Matlock broke into Madonna's UK homes and, bizarrely, wore her then-husband Guy Ritchie's clothes. He was sentenced to indefinite detention in a psychiatric hospital. For celebrities, the bigger they become, the bigger the risk of intrusion and unwanted stalking attention.
This is why celebrities and up-and-coming celebrities, rising YouTube stars, need to be so careful. Because from within that base of fans, there are going to be a couple of individuals that it's not just about, hey, I think you're awesome, I like your lifestyle, I'd like to be you someday. But there will be those that covet, want to possess, maybe even want to destroy, because then they become permanently entwined with that star.
A lot of people want to be famous. And we're seeing nowadays that people are using violence as a remedy. In his case, it was to be married to a superstar. That was his solution to his problems.
Madonna is living proof of the dangers of celebrity.
If I can't have you, no one else will.
When fan worship becomes obsession, it can become catastrophic. And for Madonna, it almost was.